After dedicating individual in-depth reviews to each main entry of the Expanse series by James S. A. Corey, or more precisely Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, it is now time to step back and examine the series as a whole. Its overall impact on science fiction, its cultural significance, and the role of the television adaptation within that broader context. Before turning to those larger considerations, however, it is worth addressing a few practical matters. The recommended reading order, my personal ranking of the novels, and how that ranking compares to aggregated audience reviews. A general spoiler warning is also appropriate here, as the following discussion touches on events across the entire series. So, be warned. The question of reading order is, in principle, straightforward. One begins with the first novel and concludes with the ninth. This linear progression is refreshingly simple for a science fiction series spanning roughly 5,000 pages, especially when compared to more structurally complex universes such as Ian M. Banks' Culture series, Alistair Reynolds' Revelation Space setting, or Orson Scott Card's Ender universe. The only real debate concerns the short stories and novellas, most of which are collected in Memories Legion. Reading them all at the very end is arguably not ideal. A more satisfying approach would be to read the prequel material after Leviathan Wakes, or even after Caliban's War, once the reader is sufficiently familiar with the setting. Ideally, the remaining novellas would be placed chronologically between the main installments, though this requires some logistical effort. For a more detailed breakdown, refer to my review of Memories Legion. Now turning to my personal ranking of the 10 entries in the series. I emphasize that this assessment is entirely subjective, though I will briefly explain my reasoning behind it. In 10th place, I would position Cibola Burn, primarily because parts of its middle section feel somewhat drawn out, particularly during the storm sequences and the storyline involving the blindness-inducing slugs. Even so, the novel deserves credit for attempting to shift the formula of the Expanse. The fact that it occupies last place in my ranking speaks more to the consistently high quality of the series than to any fundamental flaw of Cibola Burn. 9th place goes to Memories Legion. Although I am often critical of short story collections within larger science fiction series, this volume delivers consistently and meaningfully expands the lore and character backgrounds. In 8th place, I would put Tiamat's Wrath. While it contains powerful moments, some plotlines feel extended, and the novel at times gives the impression of holding position in preparation for the final installment. Ironically, Leviathan Falls, the grand finale, occupies 7th place in my ranking. It is a solid and competent conclusion, returning to the series' established strengths. However, while the ending is neither disappointing nor ineffective, it does not quite reach the crescendo one might expect from such an expansive saga. Persepolis Rising takes 6th place. The significant time jump opens new narrative possibilities and provides structural breathing room, yet in my view it also slows the pacing somewhat more than necessary. 5th place goes to Abaddon's Gate. The fleet's journey toward the ring is an effective variation of the established formula, and the mystery surrounding the protomolecule remains still compelling. Some of the newly introduced point of view characters feel less developed, though this does not apply to all of them, particularly not to Clarissa. In 4th place stands Babylon's Ashes, which concludes Marco Inaro's Free Navy arc, one of the most striking political storylines in the series. Nevertheless, its resolution feels somewhat underwhelming. Nemesis Games earns third place for its tightly constructed build-up to Marco Inaro's campaign, and for its gripping, partially even post-apocalyptic sequences following the attacks on Earth. Second place belongs to Leviathan Wakes, the novel that launched the series. Its combination of hard science fiction, political corruption, corporate intrigue, noir elements, and body horror establishes the tone and scope of the narrative universe with remarkable confidence. And finally, in first place, I would actually rank Caliban's War. It builds upon the strengths of the debut while deepening the characterization and expanding the political landscape. The introduction of figures such as Avasarala and Bobby Draper significantly enriches the series and broadens its thematic range. Comparing my ranking to aggregated reader reviews reveals several notable divergences. Tiamat's Wrath, Leviathan Falls, and Memories Legion rank higher in popular assessment than in my own. Since these novels represent the final phase of the series, one might speculate about the influence of continuation bias, though it may simply reflect different tastes. Conversely, Babylon's Ashes tends to rank significantly lower among general audiences, perhaps due to dissatisfaction with the resolution of Marco Inaro's arc. Since Nemesis Games is widely praised, it stands to reason that there is not a general disliking to Marco Inaros' character or the Free Navy arc. Turning now to the television adaptation, The Expanse received strong critical acclaim, particularly for its visual effects, character development, political complexity, and scientific realism, similar to the novels. The TV series won a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation and received multiple Saturn Award nominations. Although the adaptation is not a one-to-one translation of the novels, condensing certain plotlines and merging characters, most notably expanding Kamina Drama's role by incorporating elements of Michio Pa from the novels, it nonetheless generally does so in service of the medium and often strengthens the narrative cohesion. After 3 seasons, the Sci-Fi channel cancelled the series, repeating a familiar pattern in genre television. However, a substantial fan campaign, supported by public figures including Will Wheaton, George R.R. Martin, and Patton Oswalt, helped draw attention to the series' value and potential. Amazon Prime Video subsequently revived the show, producing 3 additional seasons and allowing the adaptation to reach a structured, if not fully definitive, conclusion. The production was widely praised for its technical accuracy, particularly in its depiction of spacecraft propulsion, decompression, stealth systems, and the physical realities of vacuum. Executive producer Nareen Shankar's background in applied physics contributed significantly to the show's credibility in these areas. When the series premiered, it entered the landscape shaped by earlier milestones in televised space opera. The 1990s had been defined by long-running, institutionally confident productions such as Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, or Babylon 5, which treated space as a setting for diplomacy, ideology, and serialized political development. The 2000s then recalibrated the genre through the moral severity of Battlestar Galactica, the remake that is, and the character-driven tone of Firefly. By the mid-2010s, then, however, large-scale non-franchise space science fiction had become comparatively rare. In that context, The Expanse functioned almost as a restoration project. It synthesized the political density of 1990s space opera with the tonal gravity introduced by Battlestar Galactica, while charting its own course. Unlike BSG's post-apocalyptic focus on survival, The Expanse portrayed a divided, yet expanding human civilization. The proto-molecule introduced cosmic horror, but the central drama remained systemic. The evolving tensions between Earth, Mars, and the Belt. In doing so, the series shifted space opera away from mythic destiny, which we saw primarily in BSG, and toward political materialism. Equally important was its demonstration that relatively hard-leaning science fiction, emphasizing thrust physics, resource scarcity, and biological adaptation, could succeed within prestige television, although parts of that was already present in BSG. While not hard science fiction in the strictest literary sense, The Expanse reintroduced a level of technical plausibility largely absent from mainstream television for decades. Contemporary productions such as For All Mankind now operate in a cultural environment more receptive to engineering realism and incremental colonization narratives. However, it remains too early to determine the full extent of the series' long-term influence. The novels concluded only recently, and the Expanse television adaptation ended in the year 2022. Lasting impact often becomes visible only in retrospect, through aesthetic echoes, industry decisions, and the assumptions future creators make about audience expectations. What can be stated with confidence is that The Expanse reaffirmed the viability of serious, politically grounded space opera outside the orbit of legacy franchises. Whether it ultimately stands as a transformative pivot point or as an exceptionally accomplished high watermark will depend on how science fiction television evolves in the coming decades. In any case, The Expanse as a novel series remains well worth reading, and The Expanse as a television adaptation well worth watching. If you liked this video, you may also enjoy the other reviews and content on my channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you want to discuss the novels or if you want to suggest other books that I should review in the future. Please consider upvoting and subscribing, it is much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and until next time.